Well, hello, Frank. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
Doing okay. That's good. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. It's good to see you too.
Okay. Well, this is our fourth visit today, and so I just kind of wanted to revisit last session. We talked about your childhood years. We kind of talked about you as a teenager and school and high school and how you enjoyed school and you were a part of the football team and
Yep.
you let me know about your good standing with your straight A's and everything. And we talked about the first time that you met Mary and how that went. And so I was just wondering before we go into today's visit if you had anything that you wanted to add further into your childhood or teenage years.
No, I think we covered
You think we covered it?
everything that I can remember.
Okay. All right. Well, perfect. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit more about your young adulthood years. And so kind of wanted to start out with a question of how life was like in your 20s.
My 20s. Well, I was in the military. Mary and I got married when she was 15 after she found out that she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And then I joined the military because I knew that I needed to provide for our family and our little one that was on their way. So Mary was at home, and our firstborn had come and was about 2 years old when we entered, or when I was in my 20s, and we were still living at the time in Alabama, and I went to a recruitment center to join the Air Force, the Navy, and at that time I was just like, man, I need to support my family, and that seemed like a logical thing to do. So
Yeah.
I remember sitting in that room, and the sergeant that was signing me up and said, like, hey, this is it, you're going to go off to basic. And then before I knew it, a couple weeks later, I was off to basic training, and Mary was at home, and that was kind of tough on me. I wanted to be around our little boy, and but then I knew that it was also a responsible thing to do, is to go and find a job and find an income and find a source of work so I could take care of my family.
Sure.
So my 20s were mostly spent in the military, and I liked it. I thought it was a good source of income. I don't know that Mary fully understood, because we would definitely get up and move around a lot. I would say every 2-3 years it seemed like I would be stationed somewhere else, from being in North Carolina to Montana to Iowa, Oregon, and just kind of all over the place. It seemed like we would consistently be moving.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the easiest thing on Mary. And then as we had more children, it seemed like every 2 years another child was coming along, and that just made for a tough move. With the young children. So yeah, I'm just kind of rambling now, but that's
No, that's okay.
that's kind of my 20s. I guess I'd say it was just in constant movement.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a lot happened in your 20s. So I wanted to go back, and you said Mary got pregnant, and that happened when she was pretty young. Is that right?
Yep, she was 15 and I was 18.
Mm-hmm. What was that like, being so young and finding out that, your girlfriend was pregnant?
I mean, at times I was scared. I mean, if I'm being truly honest, I would say that I was scared of the future. That wasn't exactly the thing I was planning to happen in my life. I was destined to go play football at the University of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
But the situation happened, and Mary got pregnant, and then it kind of seemed like life kind of just spiraled out of control from what my original plan was.
Yeah.
And I thought the most responsible thing to do was just to at least ask her to marry me, and know that I had no intention of leaving her or leaving the family that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So
So, how did that make you feel? You had kind of a life planned out prior to finding out that Mary was pregnant. And so, what would life have looked like had she not gotten pregnant?
well, I mean, even the question of would we have gotten married. I definitely loved Mary when she was 15 years old. But I also loved football. I loved to study, and I kind of had made up my mind that that football and University of Alabama were my first kind of choices that I wanted to have in my life, and not so much a family right away.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I would say it was heartbreaking
Yeah.
to kind of give up your dream, but then in a way it was also, well, I mean, I love this person, and I I could see myself raising a family with her.
Okay. So, did you and Mary, have y'all had a good marriage?
I I would like to think so. It wasn't easy at times, especially those first couple years,
Mm-hmm.
where I mean she was still a kid, and we were both kids, and I just knew that the responsible thing to do was to go and find a job, because my parents weren't going to support us, or her
Mm-hmm.
parents weren't going to support us.
Mm-hmm.
So it made logical sense to me that as soon as I graduated, that was the next step. And then there were moments where I feel like I took advantage of situations where being in the military and never fully being active, like not going to battles, but kind of having pressure situations, she would, or I would come home, and it would just kind of be like I'm drained for the day, and she'd be expecting me to help around the house and helping around with our children,
Mm-hmm.
and my attitude wasn't always the best with those situations where I could have said like, hey, I'll take the kids, why don't you go just have some alone time. But it was mostly, I was like always like those first couple of years I was like, I'm just gonna think about myself, and just like I'll put my legs up and just relax and let her deal with the kids.
Right.
And I'm surprised where we didn't have more fights.
Mm-hmm.
And it always came up, the issue of like, are you spending enough time with the family? Are you spending enough time in our interests, or are you concerned about things going on at work, or active military and things like that, and then finances, and it seemed like it was always a never-ending case of things that would come up in between us. But
Yeah.
it's the little things that I would remind her that I still love her and still do. I remember the first time I said I love her, or I love you, and it's saying things with a heart of reminding her that that's
Mm-hmm.
that's what's kept us together all this time, is that love.
That's great. Well, it sounds like you took a very challenging situation at the time and did what you had to do by joining the military, and providing for your family, that was growing. And even though it was hard at times, you knew what was going to be best for you and your wife, and you provided, and and did what you did to provide for them. So it sounds like, you did what you had to do, and that was a good thing, even though it was challenging at times.
Yep.
So, tell me a little bit more about Mary. What was she like when y'all first met each other and into your, first part of marriage?
Well, I met Mary when she was 13 years old, and I was 16 years old. So she was like a ray of light, and she like stood out to me. I was playing football with the boys down at the schoolyard, and she walked by with her friends, and I immediately kind of took notice, and I jokingly kind of nudged some of my friends and said like hey, I think that's the girl I'm gonna marry.
Really?
And it was quite the surprise when I essentially followed her home.
Oh.
kind of know where she lived, so I could maybe run into her again at a given time, and and I wasn't even sure, so it's like I would kind of the next day just kind of wait outside her house and see if she would walk by again or not, and then she walked by, and I kind of started to follow her, and like usually I'm a pretty confident guy, but for some reason around Mary I got tongue tied, and she kind of made me nervous, and oh gosh, it was just a special time where it's like all I wanted to do was get to know this person, and boy was she cute though. She was really.
How did she respond to you waiting for her?
At first it was kind of a little like, hello there, sir, and I'm like, oh, hi. And again, I kind of got tongue tied, and it was just kind of a nervous mess around her.
Yeah.
But she accepted me, and we started talking, and then I remember I asked her, hey, can we go get a milkshake down at the soda bar, and she said yes, and then it seemed like we had known each other for years after that point, and it was like easy to talk, and I couple weeks later I asked, hey, do you want to be my girlfriend? She said yes.
Aww. So it sounds like you really loved her from the first moment that you saw her.
I mean, I'm definitely a man that believes in love at first sight, and she kind of made that true statement too.
Yeah.
Later did I find out that she didn't believe in love at first sight, but she kind of felt like, oh, this guy, I mean,
he's got a little something.
He's got a little something that I'm attracted to. But then we started talking. There's just a lot of things in common, and she loved that I played football and was a straight A student, but then it's like just kind of one time or so of not being fully thought through, and things can kind of just change in the course of a split decision.
Sure.
So,
what did that look like? Walk me through kind of when Mary found out she was pregnant. How did your family react? How did that make you feel when your dad kind of kicked you out of the house?
I definitely, looking back at my life, that was definitely one of those pinnacle moments, those like mountains that just arose out of nowhere, and Mary pulled me aside, and we were kind of outside in one of our favorite malt shops, and she said something like, I need to tell you something, and I wasn't expecting what she said, and she said, I'm pregnant, and I'm like, okay. I wanted my reaction to be better. I mean, I wanted to be excited, but then it's like as soon as she said that, it's like kind of like the spiral of emotions and spirals of what my plan was going to be kind of all went to the wayside.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, I hugged her and said, "This is great," but in my heart, I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
This wasn't something I had planned for. I mean, my plan was like that next fall was I was going to be at the University of Alabama, and we were still going to be dating, and it was only going to be a short drive away. And the moment that we told my parents, again, my father was a very stern man, very by the book. This is how you do life, and this is, if you do anything to hinder that, then you're causing more grief and pain for yourself. And I remember sitting there in the dining room table, and my sister and my mother had left, and we were kind of sitting there, and I said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." And he's like, "Yeah, what's up?" And I said, "I'm going to be a father." The look that my father gave me still haunts me to this day. As he glared at me with those brown eyes, you could see emotions running deep that he didn't know how to respond. And Mary wasn't with me. It seemed like he just wanted to erupt in anger. And he said, "Okay, you're not going to get any help from us. You made this decision, and you have to deal with it." Never have I felt more low in my entire life.
Yeah.
He was going to help me in so many ways, and through college, and it just made me feel like dirt. And then Mary told her folks, and kind of the same response, saying that we won't help you, and you did this, you have to deal with the consequences. And it's like it's like I waved goodbye to a ship that everyone was going to be on, off to college and off to better things, and I was left there on the shore.
Yeah. That's pretty tough. Did you have a chance to reconcile the relationship with your father since then?
I think as I was in the military and became kind of more disciplined in my own sense, I saw why he did that, and there was a time before he passed that I did get to hear from him say, like, I mean, that wasn't the best decision on our part, but I believe it made you a stronger person, and I definitely agree to that. But it did take time. I mean, it wasn't immediately. It was a good maybe 20 years after the fact, and he saw his grandchildren, and the crucial moments of my life in raising them. It's kind of a funny thing. As soon as you become a father, you get why your father does things the way he does. And it was a trying time, but I mean, it definitely grew me into the man that I am now as I goes.
So that definitely affected your relationship with your father and kind of drew y'all apart for those few years, but it sounds like it caused you to grow up a little, and having to provide and do what you had to do again. So do you feel like you have worked through that part of your life and having your dad be so hard on you about that, and through reconciling with him all those years later, do you feel like that moment kind of gave you, some peace about what happened all those years ago?
I mean, a part of me says yes. I think there was moments of peace, but a part of me also wishes I could go back to being 18 years old and having the world at my feet and my doorstep. And part of me wants to know like what would have become of me if Mary and I didn't do the things that we did in high school, and what would have happened if I went to Alabama. But I mean,
have you ever thought about what life would have looked like had that happened?
I mean, I tried not to think about them too much because I am happy with my kids that are here, and then my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, and I wouldn't have had a chance to bring them into this world, and then therefore bringing more life into this world. But it's like I just don't feel like I can be selfish and think about just me, because at that moment it was me and Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very, I feel like it brought us closer together.
Yeah.
And she was so patient with me, being a new dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like she was more the responsible one in the relationship. And yeah, it's just weird how things just kind of happen. Like you plan everything in advance, and then just a split second that a choice is made, it can just change everything.
Definitely.
But I mean, I would say I'm okay with the situations that I made, the choices that I made, and where I'm at now.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So tell me a little bit more about the military and your early years of working. What did you do?
Well, the military makes you disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be tardy, you can't be late, you can't complain, you can't, all these kind of things that the military teaches you. But I controlled essentially making sure that everyone was on schedule of where they needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I wasn't actively like on the ground during a World War or during World War II or so, I was kind of in the background making sure that people were getting where they needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big relief for Mary and our young kids at the time, knowing that I wasn't in harm's way, that I was going to come home that night.
Mm-hmm.
But it made me appreciate those that did go into battle, and it made me appreciate America and the freedoms that we have, and the rights that we have as U.S. citizens, and I can't thank them enough. And it made me appreciate the patriotic duties that I have as being an American here in this great country.
Mm-hmm.
So it saddens me when people fight over things that they don't need to fight about. I was definitely a proud American that displayed the American flag proudly on my house, and as times got later in life, it was kind of a question like, why aren't people as proud as I am?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, again, I lived through so many different wars and different parts of my life in the military, and it's the military has a way of making you see the world in a new perspective.
How so?
I think after my initial time of getting people where they needed to go, and being told by my commanding officer that those people didn't make it, and you kind of take a moment to think about, well, they had families, they had people that cared about them, and you're like every day is like a second chance of living again, and just knowing that I could go home and be with Mary and be with our children every day was like a huge blessing. And
Well, that's great. So it
and
sounds like to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but this time in your life working in the military gave you a pretty good sense of identity and purpose. It sounds like you really enjoyed your job and getting to serve your country in that way, and we're proud to have that opportunity. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say. I think the other moment that changed for me was being in the military and also knowing that I could still get an education. I took classes during that time to make sure that, like, if the military didn't work out, I had something to fall back on.
Okay.
Again, thinking of providing, so I took classes, and then I ultimately decided to go to seminary and explore one of my passions that kind of happened after the decision was made with Mary. And after we got married, I was like, I gotta get right with God, and then God just revealed His book, the Bible, and that just kind of became my passion in studying that. And so I decided to go to seminary after I got my associate degree, and it was tough balancing that, family, the military. But I would say it was definitely worthwhile once I got into my later years of pastoring, I guess.
Okay, sure. And I would love to come back to that in just a second. Tell me a little bit about the military and how moving around so much with, an ever-growing family affected you and Mary as a married couple. Did it make it harder? Did it make it, more fun?
You're given orders and you go. Sometimes you can request where you want to go, and sometimes you end up in the middle of nowhere in Iowa. Mary always knew that we were going to move if I removed my cap as I walked in the door, because it was kind of like, we need to sit down and have a serious talk here.
So that was your way of telling her that something was changing?
I think that was kind of her tick that she got, and because I would kind of just do it in spite of, just like you take your cover off and you put it down in such a way, and Mary would take notice of the days that it seemed like we were going to move, that I would do that more often or faster or so. And those were hard discussions to say as kids got older and in school and friends, and having to uproot and move your entire family because you're told, like, this is where we want you. I mean, I'm a man who follows orders, and I said, yeah, I would do that.
Yeah.
But then it's you could tell that my family hated it. But they knew that Dad couldn't go along, but we went as a family.
Was it hard for you to move your family around that much?
For me, I look at it as I was excited to explore more of the world, but having young kids and a wife to think about, I think it really took a toll on them. Because, I mean, like I said before, we moved like two times, like 2 years. Every 2 years, it seems like we were in a new place, and we could never just really settle. It was always like, we're gonna move.
Yeah. So it makes it harder to make those concrete friendships and really build a life, because you're constantly changing and buying new houses and whatnot.
Yeah.
So how, in the way of marriage, did moving around affect you and Mary being together?
Well, I always I tried to say to Mary when we first got married is that we'd stay in Alabama our whole lives. And then that first initial conversation of saying like, hey, we're moving up to Iowa, she kind of was like, why? And I'm like, well, I got stationed somewhere else, and that's where they want me to go.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't show it, and she would probably never tell me, but I would say that she was upset.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that definitely took a toll on our marriage. I mean, there were times where my bed was empty and she was sleeping somewhere else, and not that she was sleeping with anybody else, but it was just that disagreement that was happening, and just kind of in your soul, you just feel like you let down your family.
Mm-hmm.
But it did get easier at times, but then it's like she wanted to know, is there a moment where we're just going to stop? That we're not going to be bouncing around every 2 years, starting new schools, starting new communities.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until we finally kind of settled in California down near San Diego that I felt like I would do everything I could to make sure that we stayed there as long as we could.
Yeah.
And that was the longest that we stayed there, was probably 6-7 years
Mm-hmm.
before I decided to go into pastoring full time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got yourself a good one. Mary seems like she just kind of, did what she needed to do to follow her husband and help with the kids. So
I don't deserve her.
yeah.
I mean, my greatest achievement, I would say, is being married for the 67 years that we've been married.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, there are times that we would just fight, and I'm very, very much kind of a passive aggressive person where I don't want to fight. I don't want to raise my voice. But she could definitely raise her voice and get angry with me at times.
Really?
And I'm just thankful she stood by my side.
Yeah. So would you say that marriage gets better or worse over time?
Being married to Mary, it has gotten better. I think as you grow with someone, you trust them more. Even though, like, I would say that I trusted her in our vows and everything that I said to her on our wedding day, it now seems to make more sense. And as our kids started having kids and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I look at our marriage and I'm like, it's not perfect. It will never be perfect. But I'm just glad it's stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope Mary says the same, but it's like I don't know how I'd live without her.
Yeah. It sounds like you're very grateful to have her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she definitely, when the curveball was thrown at our lives in high school, we were still able to maintain it and still not strike out or any way, but we were able to still hit the pitch.
Yeah.
So.
And that's great, because 67 years, that's a long time. You don't see that very much anymore.
And yeah, it seems like my friends and such kind of are like, well, we just kind of deal with each other now, but I'm still very proud of Mary and love her dearly.
That's great. That's a very good strength to have in your life too at 85 years old.
Yeah.
So going back to classes, you said you started taking classes in the military. You said that you felt like you needed to get right with God. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, my family growing up, I mean, we weren't church-going people. We weren't going there all the time, but it's like, Christmas and Easter, you want to go to church. And Mary's family was more church-going people, and her parents were shocked when she said that she was pregnant, and my parents were kind of like, well, that kind of happens. but still, I mean, you made your bed, you gotta sleep in it now. And Mary was always very adamant about getting our kids to church on the base, and I was kind of like, I'll just kind of tag along there for the first couple of years, and it was kind of like in my like I think I was like 21 years old, where it's just kind of the preacher. I was there sitting with our family, and it just kind of finally all clicked, and it finally made sense to me, and I attribute that to kind of knowing that there is a future, because I still was kind of blaming myself for things that were going on, and then being told that God loved me and God forgave me for all those things. It kind of was like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders, and the pressures of trying to be a young father and young in the military. I was like, okay, I feel like I can do this now.
Yeah.
And that was a really crucial moment for Mary and I, is that we got to share in that finally. And I remember telling her, I went up and prayed with the pastor, and she just embraced me, and it was like one of those just really meaningful hugs that she gave me. And then it was like after that, I just kind of said, no, I really like this Bible that they gave me, and I started to read it, and then I just wanted to understand more about it. Started meeting with the pastor on a regular basis, and he walked me through the Bible and its significant meanings and things like that, the different stories. And then I was like, no, I love this so much that let me look at seminary. Let me look at the opportunity of teaching God's word, because it had a profound impact on my life. So I was like, well, let me get my AA first. Let me get my associate degree. So I just went to a community college, did night school classes. Those were definitely long days of being in the military for 12 hours and running reports and things, and then going into class for a couple more hours after that. It was definitely a trying time, but I knew that it was what was right for my family, and so I did that, and then got my associate's degree, and then took seminary classes after that, the same schedule. So for all the way up until I was 26, 27, it was work, school, and sleep as much as I could throughout the day. And I'm very thankful that was the case for me, and that Mary was very patient with me, because she was very, very supportive in those days.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you're a very strong person as well to juggle all of those things, and it sounds like you're a big family man too, because you're always trying to provide and do what you feel like is best for your family. So that's really admirable. Yeah,
I mean, we had 5 children by the time I was 26 and graduated from seminary, and was contemplating, well, is the military where I need to be, or do I need to be seeking something else?
Right.
And so I'm still amazed at how Mary can juggle 5 children at a time.
Yeah. And
still seem to have everything in control, even though sometimes I'm like, this is just chaotic. But
yeah,
they were all mostly surprises.
Yeah.
But I was always saying, this is a good surprise.
Yeah. Well,
I think my perspective changed.
It did after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, once you got right with God, like you said, did it change your outlook on your situation and your marriage with Mary? Did it make it how did it make you feel?
Well, I know that most marriages, when there's a bad day, most of the men kind of go for the bottle to soothe their pain or something like that. And I was never one of those guys. I didn't drink in high school or anything like that. And then when Mary got pregnant, I definitely took some drinks, and knew where my dad kept his liquor, and I took them. But then I decided after that moment, I can't let this ruin families, because it has. And so I knew that I would try my best to stay away from it, but I'd be lying to say if I didn't do it into like 19, like 18, 19, those first couple of years of marriage, because it was just tough.
Right.
It was tough being you take on so much responsibility, and then it was kind of like on my 21st birthday, and from the time that I finally accepted Christ and accepted for what He did for me, I just kind of looked at alcohol and said, no more, no more. Is this going to be a something that I rely on or go to if I have a hard day? It's going to be more about talking with Mary, that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
That definitely changed the course. I feel like God definitely straightens out those that He knows what the things that we want to hold on to with everything. And it was, I would say it's definitely saved me and definitely saved our marriage.
Yeah. Well, that's a really cool thing, because looking back on your life and how young you were when you got, found out that Mary was pregnant and you were married, joined the military, you were 18 years old, so the rest of your men that were with you in the military were also 18, 19 years old, so thinking about drinking, that's kind of prime time for going out and having a good time, and you had a wife and baby at home, so that had to be challenging to resist some of that, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, yeah, you want to hang out with the boys, you want to go have a good time at the bar after a long day, but again, it's like my perspectives were in order, and I knew that I needed to be home. Because I mean, my wife at times was still a kid.
Yeah, sure.
And is still trying to juggle so much.
Right, definitely.
So
moving more into your 30s, I know you were in the military for about 20 years, so you were about like 38 years old whenever you got out, but kind of tell me a little bit about what life was like once you were out of the military.
Well, I mean, after kind of graduating from seminary, when I was 26, I thought that would be kind of my next career, but then it just kind of happened that I would stay in the military for another 12 years, and most of my kids, our oldest, graduated and then moved on, and then it just seemed like all our kids were still in their later years, in their high school years, and then 38, I just kind of felt like, no, I'm done. I'm done, and it wasn't that I was over the military, that the military treated me badly. They treated me very well. I just kind of wanted something else in this world, and that was when I was given the opportunity for the first time to be able to preach and talk about God's word, and I was like, I like this. This is fun. So after I turned 38, it was a no-brainer. Let's explore the option of teaching and preaching, and I feel like that was the first time that Mary was full-heartedly supported me in that decision, because I said we're not leaving California. We're gonna stay in California, because what I thought was 6-7 years turned into 12 years or so, and I said let's look at the opportunity of doing work here in California. So we stayed in California, and just kind of put my name out there at different churches, and finally got the call or an invitation to go be the full-time pastor of the church.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's great. So, were you happy with that choice to move to California and become a pastor?
Well, I mean, being an Alabama boy, I mean, my parents weren't thrilled about it. But again, being in California, I felt like it was kind of a fresh start, and it gave me an opportunity to make my own path and my own destiny, I guess. But I think at that moment, it was I was just more about well, I just want to stay somewhere that my kids can grow up and my wife can have a steady community around her.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just like, I'll follow orders, and luckily the orders said to stay in California. So I was very, very happy to stay in California, and then it just kind of made sense that let's continue to stay in California into our high school days, and we didn't move that far off the base, and just kind of started there in that community that we were in.
Yeah. So I know you have 5 kids, so can you tell me a little bit about them and your relationship with them back then?
Well, I was at times very strict still. I think I inherited that from my father. Again, being in the military, you kind of have a way of planning how things should go, and you kind of have in your head is like, well, they like when you get home, their beds are made and they're doing their homework, and they're not harassing mom or making her life difficult, and it definitely surprised me to come home and most of the time it was just chaotic.
Yeah.
So it's like you would sit them down and say, hey, this is what I expect of you, and then at times they would be like, well, yeah, I mean, that's what you expect, but we're going to do our own thing, because I mean that's how I was. And but my one thing I didn't do was I didn't pressure them that I expected A's in everything, that they were perfect in every ways. They knew that, especially with our firstborn, like something had changed in me, and just that I needed to be more present, and I definitely tried to strive to be present there, to do homework with them, or just watch a football game or something like that. And but I would say that at times there were frustrations with our children, and but then it was always kind of like, well, why did you do that? And there was a healthy response to that. But I could definitely tell, like, I mean, they told us like 20 years or so, they're all adults, they said that, like, Dad, we definitely snuck around you and Mom a lot, and we're like, oh my goodness, we had no idea. We just held you guys on such a high board of things because you're doing all these great things. But then it's like it was like confession time at Thanksgiving or something. And it was eye-opening to hear of all the things that they did do, because it's like you put them on such this high pedestal of when they're young, that they're perfect children, but then you're like, you hear all their stories and you're like, oh my goodness, what is
how did I miss that?
how did I miss that? Exactly. And but I'm thankful for each and every one of them. And then one of our sons did pass away recently, and it's weird to bury your child, that you think that they're going to bury you, and that I feel like after that it just kind of made our family a little bit closer knit together.
Yeah.
Even now, just living back here in Texas, and living with our youngest Jane, that you just feel like that closeness, that they still do care for you, even though you're getting older and your needs are a little bit higher. But
yeah,
I'm thankful that she's there, and then our son-in-law Jack as well. It's good that they met quality people that actually love your children.
Yeah.
And then having family close by, just a couple towns away. It's good to be close to family. That was a hard decision to make, leaving California after being empty nesters, and spending that time in Hawaii for those 7 years that we were the interim pastors out there on the islands, and that kind of felt like retirement. But then it was like, well, kind of as we were getting older, it made sense to move back into Texas and be with our close families. So.
Yeah. Well, from everything you just told me, it sounds like you were a really great father, very present, and took quality time out of your day to spend with your children, watching football games and making sure they were doing what they needed to do, and being there as a parent to provide support and love. Definitely can't imagine what that's like to bury a child before yourself.
Hmm.
That definitely has to be hard. But overall, it sounds like your experience as a 20-year-old and 30-year-old was a pretty good one.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it shaped me for who I am today. I
Yeah.
would say, because it's so much happened in those 10 years, from starting a family, maintaining a family, and then trying to love Mary in new ways,
Mm-hmm.
and understand why I still loved her, and still love her. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's the 20s were a trying time, but
Mm-hmm.
it definitely made me a stronger individual.
Good. Good. Well, I have enjoyed our time today, talking with you about your young adulthood life. We covered a lot of ground. Definitely loved learning more about you and Mary, growing up, in the early years and being married. We talked a lot about that and your
Hmm.
time in the military and becoming a pastor. A lot has happened in your life.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So you have a lot of good stories. I'm sure I haven't heard all of them, but definitely we will keep talking. Just kind of wanted to go over what next week will look like. We're going to be
Okay.
talking more about your older adulthood. Would love to hear more about your children. Definitely talk more about them next week, and would love to learn about hobbies that you had. And then part of next week is what you feel like would be good for you as an older adult to pass down to the next generation. So definitely give you time to reflect on that and what you would like to give the next generation, whether that's your wisdom, words of wisdom, and then kind of the legacy that you've built in your life, and what that looks like. So if you
Okay.
don't have anything else that you want to talk about today, then we will meet next week at the same time and same place.
Okay.
Okay.
It's good.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you, Frank.
Thank you.